Good evening, and we're getting our candidates seated. And welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Doris Ray, member of the Horizon House Elections Forum Committee and chair of the subcommittee on questions. This forum will be broadcast, recorded for replay in our in-house TV and will be available on our YouTube channel. Tonight, we are pleased to welcome candidates for the Seattle School Board. However, before I introduce them, a bit of background. The school district, the Seattle School District Board of Directors, has 7 members elected in odd number years for 4-year staggered terms. The members are elected to specific districts, geographic districts. Candidates run within their districts during the primaries, and they are elected at large in the general election. So you will be voting for four seats this time. This year, 4 districts have nominated candidates. You'll note that the member for the district that includes Horizon House was elected in 2021. So this seat was not included in this year's election. Now I'd like to introduce the candidates. District 1, we have Debbie Carlsen and Liza Rankin. District 2, the candidates are Christen Posten and Lisa Rivera Smith. However, neither Miss Posten nor Miss Smith was able to be with us tonight. District 3, we have Evan Briggs and Ben Gitenstein. And District 6, the candidates are Gina Topp and Maryanne Wood. Miss Wood is unable to be with us tonight. The primary responsibilities of the Seattle School District Board of Directors are, first, to hire, supervise, and evaluate the superintendent. Also, to set the vision, mission, and strategic goals of the district. To review, revise, and adopt policies. To establish and oversee the budget, and to serve as community representatives. School district positions are officially nonpartisan. According to the information posted in the school district website, each board member may receive compensation of $50 per day or portion thereof for attending board meetings and for performing other services on behalf of the school district, not to exceed $4,800 per year. Now let our forum begin. I'm pleased to introduce our moderator, Neil McReynolds. Neil? Oh, you're right. Okay. You want this one?
Thank you very much, Doris. I'd like to add my welcome to thanks to the 5 candidates who are with us tonight, and welcome all of you to this election forum. The candidates have received the format and the ground rules that we will follow this evening. I'll briefly review them so that those in the audience can anticipate with the way the forum will proceed. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for an opening statement. This will be followed by the question and answer period, which candidates will have 1 minute to respond to each question. At the end of the question and answer period, each candidate will have 2 minutes for a closing statement. So this is a forum, not a debate. It won't be no time for a rebuttal. However, candidates may include such remarks in their closing statements, and should they wish. Candidates, please note, we have some tough timers out here. So we appreciate your honoring the signals. There are signals to you. They will assure an all is fair to all, everybody, and we'll cover as many topics as possible with our questions. Our timers, Dell Reynolds and Susan Underwood, are in the front row, and we'll give an on-screen warning signs that will alert you that when you have 15 seconds remaining, then you'll get the final signal to finish. Now, please note that in the order in which candidates will be responding to questions is managed to avoid having any candidate responding to the same order of the question being posed. Well, now for the opening statements. Please step to the podium, and so everyone can see who's making the opening statement. This is the only question we have sent to the candidates in advance. So that question is, why are you a candidate for the Seattle School Board? What are your goals and emphasis in this position? And how will you accomplish these goals? For the opening statements only, you're called on by district in alphabetical order. So let's start. Okay, District 1, Debbie Carlsen.
Do you want to? Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Debbie Carlsen, and I am running for Seattle School Board Director here in District 1. And I am running because I am very concerned that there are school closures coming down the pike. I am concerned because this is very disruptive to students as well as to families. And at this time, I believe that school closures should be the very last option before every other option is explored to try to balance the budget and address the school deficit, the budget gap deficit. What I am concerned about is that there is a lack of transparency from the district on what is happening right now. What schools will be closed? Why will they be closed? Why now? How will this impact communities? And particularly, I'm concerned that there is a lack of community engagement that's happening. Students and community members are not being engaged who might be the most impacted. I believe that there needs to be a stronger level of community engagement within our community, especially around large or crucial district decisions like school closures. And I believe that neighborhood schools that might be closed, they deserve to have a voice and be brought along in this process. Particularly what I'm concerned about when it comes to community engagement and transparency is that at this time, the district has not made a case for school closures to happen now. They have, in fact, Dr. Jones has actually been quoted in the Seattle Times that this will not close the budget gap, that there won't be a significant impact until maybe 2 to 5 years from now. Very quickly, I wanted to end by saying that I'm endorsed by the Teachers Union, Seattle Education Association, MLK Labor, Seattle Times, Teresa Mosqueda, Lorena Gonzalez, Jean Cole-Wells, and many more. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
No, thank you. Yeah, Lisa?
Hi, good evening. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here tonight. I was here in 2019 and I thought I remembered it, but I didn't recognize this room. And thankfully, it's not me. This is a new space. So, and it's lovely, and it's really great to be here with you all tonight. I am Liza Rankin. I'm the current Seattle School Board Vice President and also serve as the legislative liaison for the board. I'm the mom of 2 SPS students, and I'm a former SPS student myself. I'm running for re-election because we are at such a critical time right now for public education nationally and here in Seattle. And we really need a board that knows our communities, knows our schools, understands the complexities of the budget and enrollment challenges that we're facing, and can navigate the many demands of our system and still prioritize and center around what our students need. I have a record of student-centered policy work, institutional knowledge, community relationships, and trust from a decade of public school advocacy to build on and continue to support positive progress in our district. In my first term, I focused on student and educator well-being and the implementation of effective governance practices to improve student outcomes and increase transparency and accountability for the public, even during an ever-changing pandemic landscape. From volunteering at COVID test sites and in schools through efforts to increase mental and behavioral health support for students, to leading on gun violence prevention and coordinating on statewide advocacy to win the largest increase in state history for special education funding, I've shown my commitment and effectiveness at upholding the vision and values of our community and what we all want for our kids. I'm committed to continuing to put my skills and experience to work and build back trust and confidence. And not only that, but bring joy and excitement to the experiences of our students and educators every day. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. And now from District 3, Evan Briggs.
Testing. Okay. Hi, all. I am Evan Briggs. It's nice to be here. I am the mom of 3 SPS students. I have a 3rd grader, a 7th grader, and a 9th grader. So we've been in Seattle Public Schools for about 10 years and I'm at the midway point. I have about 10 years to go. I'm also a documentary filmmaker, and interestingly, my first feature-length film, which came out in 2017, took place in a retirement home that had a preschool housed inside of it in West Seattle. And I'm a really big fan of spaces that allow for intergenerational interaction. So that's one of my special things that I think is really important. I am running for the Seattle School Board because I feel that every child in this city, regardless of the neighborhood they live in, is entitled to a top-notch education. I am also very concerned about the youth mental health crisis that's afflicting young people across the nation right now. I'm concerned about fiscal transparency and community engagement. I think there has been a long track record of mistrust between the district and the community and parents. And I think we're at a turning point where we have a new relationship. Our current superintendent has really shifted the paradigm there. And I think that we are on track to really change that dynamic. And so there's an opportunity to rebuild trust. And I think that is so critical, because when we all realize that we're on the same side for kids have better outcomes. And that's actually just proven to be true. In districts where there is a functional collegial relationship between the superintendent and the board, that trickles down and results in positive outcomes for kids. So I am very inspired by what I see as a real shift in that dynamic in our school board with our superintendent, and I want to continue moving in that direction. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Evan. Yeah, Ben?
Hello, is that working? Hear me okay? Okay, so I'm Ben Gitenstein. I'm running for District 3, which is Northeast Seattle. I'm a huge fan of Seattle Public Schools. I have a kid in Seattle Public right now. I think that's a wonderful gem of an institution. I have some props with me, but that institution is in crisis. And you can see that in our budget deficit. Today, we have an $80 million budget deficit. That is on its way to $153 million in 4 years. And cumulatively, we have a $455 million budget deficit over the next 4 years. Which means if you look at our budget, we're actually going to hit a serious fiscal cliff in 2025, where our general fund will hit a negative $80 million balance. We have a serious budget problem coming our way. There's 2 big drivers to that budget crisis. Number 1 is enrollment. Our enrollment overall is declining about 6%, and we're losing the most kids in kindergarten and 6th grade. It is absolutely true that demographics and housing play a role in that. My first career was in housing policy. I was the executive director of the Washington Low Income Housing Alliance, where we worked on bringing more money in for affordable housing. But it's also true we have a school choice problem where kids and families are choosing to go places other than Seattle Public, and we need to reverse that trend. The second big problem is special ed funding. We get about $24,000 per head from the state for each special education kid in Seattle, but we spend about $33,000 per kid. We do not spend enough on special education. We should spend more. It is wonderful the work that we accomplished last year, but we have a long way to go to close this gap. And as long as we have this gap, we will have a budget deficit. So what should we do about it? Number one, we have to drive up enrollment. If we added 6,500 kids to our enrollment rolls, we would not have a budget deficit. That is a community engagement problem. Number two, we have to shift resources from the central office into the classrooms. Number three, we have to work hard in Olympia and build a broad coalition to close that gap. And finally, we have to keep our small neighborhood schools open because they're a source of strength. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Ben. Okay, for District 6, Gina Topp.
Thank you, Neil. And thank you to the Horizon House for hosting this forum, and for Doris, the wonderful background. I think that's extremely helpful. My name is Gina Topp, and I am running in District 6, which is West Seattle, South Park, Georgetown, Soto, and Pioneer Square. I'm running because growing up here in Washington State, I experienced firsthand our underfunded school system. And now as I'm preparing to send my daughter into that same underfunded system, I'm worried. You know, Ben talked about it. Our schools are facing a staggering budget deficit. The board is currently talking about cutting not just buses and music programs, but laying off teachers and closing schools. It's clear in this moment we need leaders with experience, and I bring that experience. As Chief Legal Counsel and Policy Advisor to the King County Executive Dow Constantine, I dealt with difficult budgets and policy decisions. I bring the experience with budgets and a deep understanding of how to create strong policy. I also have strong relationships with county, city, state leaders that I can leverage to get more collaboration and resources with the school district. My experience and strong relationships is shown through my endorsements. I'm endorsed by the Seattle Education Association, our educators in our schools, both the Seattle Times and the Seattle Stranger, as well as the Martin Luther King Labor Council, and many others. I believe that education is the foundation of our democracy, and there's no reason why in one of the most prosperous regions in this country, we can't have the best education system. And I bring that experience in order to make sure that our schools are the best they possibly can. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much, Gina, and for all of you for your opening comments here tonight. Well, now for the questions prepared by our residents. And that's really important to all of you. These were done by the residents, and we take great pride in the kind of questions who are being addressed to our candidates to visit. The order of the questions asked will be rotated by district number and alphabetical order. So question number one. Recently, community members have been made a variety of responses to the question posed by the school district. What does a well-resourced school look like? Well, the school district definition of a well-resourced school will be finalized later this month. Those who are candidates, how do you define a well-resourced Seattle public school? Okay, let's start off with Evan. Yes, please. I think so people can see it right at your place.
Great. Yeah, so a well-resourced school, I think looks like a lot of things. I think for one, it includes art. I think art education is really important in schools. Music education is really important in schools. Full academic support for a variety of learning needs. And also, I think we need robust mental health services in our schools. So we need administrative support, and we need teachers that feel that they have the classroom support they need in order to be able to meet the needs of all the diverse learners that we have in our diverse city. So I think we need, in order for that to happen, we need to have schools that are enrolled at certain levels so that we can streamline administrative overhead and make sure that every kid is getting all of those things.
Yep. Ben?
Oh, is that on? Okay, great question. I think a well-resourced school is got sort of 2 or 3 attributes to it. The first is it's deeply connected to the students and the families that it serves. And the second is that it's responsive to the actual felt needs of those kids. I think that reality is that in order for schools to have those attributes, they need to be small. There need to be a mixture of school sizes. It is true that larger schools are a more efficient use of dollars. I can put fewer admins in a small school and put more kids underneath them. And there is value to that. The problem with the push towards larger consolidated schools is that it's harder for a principal of a school with 1,600 kids to know what's going on with each one of them. And so a smaller school brings an asset and a value that makes it possible for them to be connected and responsive that a larger school can't do. And so I think we should try to stay away from having only large schools.
Thanks very much, Ben. Okay, next. Yep.
Perfect. So my vision for a well-resourced school is a welcoming school system where every student has the opportunity to thrive and teachers have the resources and respect in order to do their jobs. This is a system that doesn't have resource inequalities, a system that prepares students for the 21st century workforce, a system that has where students have access to mental health services and behavioral health services to support their well-being, and a system, quite frankly, that is not based on an antiquated tax system to fund it, but a system that is based on ability to pay and that is fair. That is my vision for a well-resourced school.
Okay. Thank you, Gina. Okay. Debbie?
Yep, it's on. Thank you. This is a great question. I know that we as a community have been talking a lot about what is well-resourced schools. And I think that it changes based on different communities throughout Seattle. And I think that that type of diversity and the different cultural responses that different communities have need to be respected. And similar to what other candidates have said, I do believe there needs to be a understanding of larger opportunities for larger schools as well as smaller schools. I have a first grader at an elementary school. It's a medium-sized school, but it has a small focus type of school sense. It's in our neighborhood, and I believe that that's a really important aspect of a well-resourced school. I also believe in smaller class sizes, art and music. I believe that there needs to be mental health services, enrichment programs, after-school programs, similar to what my other fellow candidates have said as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Debbie. Yeah, Lisa?
Thank you. So I could, because I'm the incumbent, I have a really good understanding of what limitations we have, what boundaries we have to operate within. And so when we talk about well-resourced schools, it's really important to think about the way that we're connected as a system between our schools. We need to think about a well-resourced system of schools so that we don't risk pitting communities against each other, fighting each other for resources instead of working together as a whole system to take care of the kids in our community. And so first and foremost, a well-resourced system of schools is one in which your neighborhood is not a determining factor in the quality of education that you will receive. In order for us to have a system of well-resourced schools, we need to make sure that every neighborhood school has the resources, support, and staffing that it needs to ensure that any student can go to any school in Seattle Public Schools, enjoy differences and variety in community and different things that may be available locally, but that they have a guarantee of a high-quality public education in any Seattle Public School.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. Okay, moving to question 2. Well, looking at the budget shortfall of over $100 million for the coming school year, what will your priorities be in achieving what you consider to be a well-resourced school under your jurisdiction as a board member? Gina, you get to lead off this one.
Is it working now? Oh, there we go. So I think this is a great question because I think when you create budgets, you work off a set of values. I can't say what I would do currently today, but I can say what my values would be looking at future budgets. And they would be first protecting programs to meet our educational goals in early literacy, mathematics, college and career readiness. It would be avoiding cuts in programs that create welcoming environments. These are mental health services in our schools. It would be ensuring that educators feel supported in their budget decisions, and also engaging parents and communities in the decisions that we make. I think by using those sort of 4 pillars or values are what I would take into making budget decisions as we face this budget deficit. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Gina. Ben?
Okay, so as you may have seen from my opening, I care a lot about the budget. I'm spent most of my life looking at financial models, so this is something I care a lot about and am comfortable with. Look, the reality is we have to find a short-term bridge to a long-term solution. There is no easy answer. If there was an easy answer, we would have found it already. What we are going to have to do is to find the solutions that get us through the worst part of the near part of this while we build a solution that can last for the long term. As I said in the opening, I think the biggest the biggest levers we can turn are increasing enrollment by getting communities and neighborhoods re-engaged in Seattle Public and really passionate about their neighborhood school. We need to drive up the partnership in Olympia and broaden that base of support so that we can tackle the long-term problem of special education funding. And then the third thing is we need to shift dollars more and more away from the central office and into the classroom, where I think they have the most bang for our educational buck, as they say.
Thank you, Ben. If the other candidate for District 3, Evan?
Yeah, I would echo a lot of what Gina and Ben have already stated. I think we need, when it comes to dealing with the funds that we actually have available, which are not enough. We wish there were more, and there's not. That we need to keep cuts as far away from the classroom as we possibly can. That would be a huge priority of mine. I also think we really need in this moment to invest serious money in mental health services for our kids. I think kids need to be able to access that in school, because if we cannot treat our kids and see them as whole people and tend to them as whole people, then they will not be able to learn and they will not be able to thrive in our schools. So I think for right now, in this moment, given what we know about where kids are mentally coming out of the pandemic, that we need to prioritize that for the short term. And then beyond that, I think we do have long-term work to do to figure out how we prevent this kind of budget shortfall from happening again.
Thank you, Evan. Okay, or District 1, Lisa? Liza.
It's okay. It's okay. If there wasn't also Elisa on the school board, I'd be like, whichever. But I don't want people to confuse me with another person. So, so the question is, what would we focus on in budget? Okay. So regardless, no matter what, we have to focus on using our resources to provide what our students need. We have so many adults in our system who get to make all the decisions, who have all the conversations. And we sometimes forget that we're adults making decisions that impact children, and forget and center what would be easier for us or convenient for us, or we get used to doing something a certain way. And we forget that there are kids at the center who we're doing all of this for. And so the most important thing is to focus on, as previous speakers have said, focus on, get really critical about our spending. And if it's not going to improving outcomes for students, cut it. That's our whole job. And that includes thinking about how central office does support our buildings.
Thank you. Okay, Debbie?
This is kind of the crucial question that we're continually being asked, and there is no easy answer to this. And it's definitely, there'll be some short-term, but also long-term solutions. Some of the short-term solutions that I think we need to be working on right now is increasing enrollment. Like Ben had said, the biggest areas where enrollment is declining is in kindergarten and in middle school. In kindergarten, we need to increase enrollment by bringing in more preschools to schools. We need to build relationships with early learning facilities and leaders to build those relationships and have a partnership of bringing more children into our schools. Also, I do know that housing and gentrification in Seattle is an issue. I also have a housing background, and I believe that there's some solutions that we can have as far as producing and connecting housing around the district solutions. I also, though, am a proponent of a biennial independent audit to ensure that we are, okay, sorry, I'll have to, please see me afterwards. Sorry, this is difficult, the 60-second thing, I'll just say.
Thank you very much, Debbie. Okay, question number 3. What priorities would you use to make budget decisions to address funding shortfalls from the state? Okay, first up this time will be Debbie. Debbie, I'm sorry. Sure. What priorities would you use to make budget decisions to address funding shortfalls from the state? Okay,
so funding shortfalls from the state, I believe in a wealth tax. And I believe that that needs to be something that we are advocating for as far as the educational community to bring in more funds. I can tell you right now that the capital gains tax is actually bringing in funds to education as well as early learning, and it's making an impact. I am an early learning educator, and I'm also an early learning advocate in Olympia. And I know that those funds are making a direct impact, both in education and early learning, and it's giving us more access to programming. I also think that we need to build stronger relationships with lawmakers, which is what I was saying, and I'll try to do this in 15 seconds, is that I do believe in a biennial independent audit, financial audit, so that we know exactly what our budget is and we can be transparent with the public about that and build back stronger relationships and trust with lawmakers. Thank you.
Okay, Lisa. Liza.
Like Manelli.
I'll make it work. That's right. That's a good analogy.
So as the current board legislative liaison, I'm in the process right now of drafting our legislative priorities for the 2024 session. I met with our entire Seattle delegation last week, and we talked about successes that we had together last session. As I mentioned in my opening comments, I coordinated and led advocacy across the state to help secure that increase in special education funding that's the highest we've seen in our state. The most important thing that I have committed to our legislators to doing in our continued relationship of this upcoming session is to get better about defining what it is we want to fund instead of just asking for more dollars. Asking for more dollars is falling on it's just too vague. And so I have committed to and was successful last session in describing what the gap in our special education funding actually is and why it's important that they increase our funding. And I've committed to doing that more for this upcoming session to just help grow the understanding of why we need more funding.
Thanks, Lisa. Okay, at the other end of the table, Gina, for District 6, you're up.
Perfect. So, Seattle is not the only district with a school funding problem. I think we've seen across Washington state schools struggling with their budgets. And to fix our school funding problems, we must address the underlying issues in Washington's regressive tax structure. Our tax system has essentially remained unchanged since we relied on commodities like salmon and timber. And our economy has evolved a little since then, and it's unacceptable that one of the most prosperous regions in our country struggles to fund education and other critical services. As an attorney with a master's in tax law, I'm not only deeply passionate about how we fund education, but I bring expertise to the table, and I'm going to draw on my expertise to work with a coalition to make sure that we work on a tax system here that is based on ability to pay, that is fair, and that meets the needs of the 21st century, including how we fund our education. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Gina. Okay, back to District 3, Evan.
Yeah, so to echo a little bit of what's already been said here, I think underfunding schools is not unique to Seattle. It's not even unique to Washington state. I think this is an issue that affects the entire nation. We as a nation underfund public education. I think that is exacerbated here in Washington State because of our regressive tax policies, which is how you can end up in a situation where you have so much wealth and money concentrated in the city and so few of those resources going to schools. And I think the most effective thing that we can do to address that is getting back to sort of comments that I made in my opening statement, which is I think this has a lot to do with relationship building and coalition building and coming together and working together as partners, recognizing that we're all on the same side for kids and that we are so much stronger when we are working together and advocating at the state level for the funding that we need.
Thanks, Evan. Ben?
Okay. So when I first started out, my first career was working as the executive director of the Washington Low Income Housing Alliance, and I spent a lot of time in Olympia. And that's where I got to know former Speaker of the House, Frank Chopp, who's endorsed me in this campaign. And we worked together to get the Washington State Housing Trust Fund up to $100 million for the first time. We did that. It was mostly Frank. I sort of rode around behind him and took notes. But what he taught me was that when you are trying to build coalitions in Olympia, the most important thing is that the legislator from Spokane sees that the solution to your problem is also a solution to the problem that they have. You have to build a big tent that everybody sees themselves in. We have this magical thing right now where it's actually, when I was talking about the gap in special education funding, that gap doesn't actually exist in general education funding. It's still bad, but because of the McCleary fix that was done several years ago, it's much better. We have not done the same thing in special education. A legislator in Spokane has the same problem. And we have to go to that legislator and say, hey, let's fix this problem together.
Thank you, Ben. Okay, moving on to question 4, developed by our residents committee. So, some constituencies report that the school board does not hear them. What will you do about it? Start off with District 6, Gina.
Hello. There we go. So I have a strong background in community engagement, and I can show that from my history working at the county, where I have engaged community to do things like when they brought the issue that ICE flights were using our airport, we engaged together with immigrant rights organizations to create and stop ICE, to create an executive order that stopped ICE from using our King County Boeing field. Or when community members brought concerns forward that the inquest program in King County, which is a fact-finding mission when there is an officer-involved shooting, that it had problems. We made the system more transparent and fair. We worked with community and heard that one of the issues was, families weren't provided attorneys, and we made it possible so they would have attorneys. Is that sort of experience where I have working with community members, hearing their concerns and finding solutions that I will bring to the school board. Thank you.
Thank you, Gina. Okay, Ben.
So I think the answer to this is sort of in 3 parts. The first thing is you gotta listen, which means you have to make yourself available. So Leslie Harris endorsed me. She's a current school board member, and she does this wonderful thing where she makes lasagna and goes to a set place every month, and people can come talk to her. I think that's a fabulous tradition. One I'd love to. My lasagna is not very good, but it's one I'd love to keep up. I think my lasagna is actually pretty okay, but that's a separate problem. The second thing is you got to ask, which means that not everybody wants to come talk to a school board member or sees why they would ever want to do that. So you need to actively go out into schools and communities and kind of poke at them and ask, like, how's it going? You need to talk to all the principals. You need to talk to all the PTAs and say, like, so how's it going? And then the third thing you need to do is you need to act. And this is where I think we miss the boat a lot, is that we ask a lot of questions or we listen a lot, and then somebody tells you, get a general sense for what's really important to a community. You need to act on it. You need to show results to that community that you'll actually get something done.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. Oh, Evan.
Okay. So what we know, well, to begin, I think it's very important. Everybody needs to be heard. Everybody needs to be heard. And this includes community members, people who don't have kids in the system. Everybody needs to be heard. And what we know from research is that the families that are least likely to feel that they can participate are families with non-English speaking parents, or a preferred language other than English, and families where there's any member of the family that has a disability. So we know in particular that those groups have an extra hard time having their voice be heard. And so I think we need to figure out what are the barriers to families accessing community engagement, meaningfully participating in our larger school community and addressing those barriers.
Lisa?
So this might sound like it's far from the question, but I promise you it's not. I think the most important thing that we need to do is get really serious about role clarity between the board and the superintendent and staff. Too often when people are coming to me as a school board member, it's because they have gone so many other places and haven't gotten an answer and been sent to a different person over and over again and are just so frustrated that they are saying, I need help with this issue. So I think a huge thing that we can do in policy, which is something I'm embarrassingly passionate about, is to make sure that there is understanding on behalf of the whole community about when there's an issue, who do you go to, what to expect, and make sure that that person knows that that's the expectation of them. That's something really simple we can change off the bat, or that I'm working on right now, rather. And then in terms of the individual meetings, I find that going out into community, I can reach many more people and talk to many more variety of voices than having set meetings in one place. It tends to be lots of repeat customers who I love to spend time with, but that's not hearing from the whole community.
Yeah, Debbie?
So I think community engagement is on a lot of our minds, especially when big decisions are made from the district, like school closures. And I want to just emphasize that I'm really concerned that the district is not engaging in authentic and strong community engagement around a decision that's going to have disruptive consequences to student and family lives. And I think that I might differ a little bit with my opponent here, is that I do believe that when we're doing community engagement, we need to have community forums within our district, as well as going and meeting organizations and communities where they also are residing or being. I also think that so we need to have a multi-pronged approach around community engagement and be available in multiple different ways, including access with language, disability, and so forth, and thinking really in an accessible way and changing culture around community engagement at the district level. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. Okay, moving on, question number 5. How can we get better results in addressing the racial and ethnic achievement gaps and advancing educational equity? District 1 gets a chance. Debbie, you're off.
Can you hear me? Oh, there I am. Okay. So the Seattle School District has had a long history of racial inequity, and we have been dealing with this issue for a long time. And this isn't an easy solution, but I do in this way really agree with the teachers. There are solid ways that we can change the culture of Seattle School District to really encourage a sense of belonging and safety, particularly for BIPOC students. One, we need to hire and retain more educators of color to be able to, so that students see someone familiar in teaching them. We need to also have inclusive curricula that includes both LGBTQ students with disability as well as BIPOC students in all classes and areas. And we also need to invest in professional training around race and social justice and social equity for both administrators, principals, and educators throughout the year, and keep that centered in the culture. Thank you.
Thank you. Lisa?
So to get better results in educational equity, we need to stop talking about it and we need to actually address it. And I'm really proud to be part of the board that is doing that for the first time in Seattle Public Schools. We have we are adopting a framework of governance that's focused on student outcomes in a way that we have not seen here in Seattle before, that holds the superintendent accountable for making progress on goals. And our goals are very clearly defined, and they are very clearly centered on academic outcomes of Black boys. Because if you say all students we know that those gaps and inequities are going to persist, that we have to be brave enough to address the issue and say, we're not trying to improve outcomes for all students. I mean, we are, but we're going to improve outcomes for all students by ensuring that we are improving academic outcomes for the students furthest from educational justice. So if you watch our board meetings, you'll see us do progress monitoring towards those goals, and I think we're going to make a difference.
Thank you. Gina?
Yeah. So we know that looking at outcomes, graduation rates, career readiness, Black and Brown students, specifically males, have the worst outcomes. I think the Seattle Times just did an article on reading as well. And the school district has centered their resources to address these inequalities that have come from structural racism in our society. And so the school district has centered their work and their resources on helping these students raise test scores, see themselves in the curriculum, and they are learning and providing pathways to success. And I think that's correct. I think the interim measurements are not real promising. It shows, and I'm quoting from their metrics online, without significant change, results indicate without significant change, results will not be delivered. So we need to figure out what that means and how to change it. If we're going to center our resources there, we need to make sure that we are seeing the results that we want. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Gina. Evan?
So the persistent opportunity gap that has plagued Seattle public schools, I remember learning this several years ago, and I was very surprised to find out that we have the 5th worst opportunity gap between Black and white students of any major school district in the nation, which was very surprising when you learn that, because we think of Seattle as being progressive and liberal, and that shouldn't happen in a city like ours. And this is the legacy of redlining in our city. And this is how some schools have ended up very, very heavily resourced and other schools not. And so there's a lot that is at play here, including housing. And we're very segregated in this city by housing. So in order to really get at the root of this problem, we need to start addressing issues like housing, segregation, and affordability. We also need to provide more advanced learning opportunities for all kids and do that equitably. We need to keep the bar high and make sure that every kid has what they need to meet that. And, okay.
Thank you very much. Ben?
We on? Okay. So I don't pretend to be an education policy expert. I am not one. There are a lot of wonderfully smart people out there who are education policy experts. I don't come from that field, but I can tell when something's not working. So right now, only about 30% of the students furthest from educational justice are meeting target scores for math and reading in 3rd and 7th grade. And by the way, those numbers are not materially improving. In some cases, they're getting worse. So I can't tell you exactly how to solve the problem, but I can tell you what we're doing right now is not working. And what we need is a radically different approach. And we need to have an honest, serious conversation about what we are currently doing and why it is not working. I don't believe that conversation has to be disruptive or disrespectful or cause angst or like a dysfunction between parties. It's just a debate and an honest conversation about, hey, what we're doing is not working. What would work? And I'm not, that conversation is going to take some painful moments, but it's a conversation that needs to happen.
Thank you, Ben. Okay, moving to question 6. What do you consider or would consider to be your primary responsibility as a school board member? Debbie?
So the primary responsibilities of a school board member is to be an ambassador to the community, someone who is transparent in information and communication, that can take complex systems and make it digestible and accessible to students, to voters, to people who even don't pay attention to education, because we're all paying for it. A board member also is someone who understands and passes the budget and they oversee it and make sure that it aligns with the values of the district. As a school member also is someone who passes policies that should be aligned with the overall values and goals of the district. And overall, the board members are out. They should be collaborative and working together to solve problems that comes up on a regular basis. And I think that we need new leadership to make sure that the board currently is more cohesive and working together as a team. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. Please.
Well, we've got the state mandated requirements of a school board director are to pass a balanced budget every year, hire and evaluate the superintendent, write and approve policy, and serve actually not as an ambassador to the community, but as a representation of the community to the district. That's our roles. Right now, my biggest responsibility is on our policy manual. We have just a backlog of decade of outdated, duplicative, and honestly useless policies. And because of that, it's nearly impossible to actually hold accountable anybody to meeting the expectations that our community has. And so that approve and adopt policy is my largest responsibility right now. And as Ben was talking about difficult conversations, it is a difficult conversation because people are very used to doing things some way. And I'm trying to get everybody on board with really using our policies as the guide they were intending to be and holding people accountable to following them.
Thank you. Okay, Gina, if you want to start.
Perfect. I think the role of a school board is to create a school district where every student has the opportunity to thrive, where students and parents are excited to start each and every school day. And they do that, I think, through three different ways. And we've heard mentions of them tonight. It's the budget, it's through policy creation, and it's through community engagement. It's through those three mechanisms, I think a school board member operates in order to create the outcomes where students are excited for school, where they thrive. That's what I think a school board member should do.
Thank you. Ben?
So the school board is an oversight body. That's functionally what it does. You're voters and taxpayers. It is really the only mechanism that we have as voters and taxpayers to provide real oversight of a $1.2 billion organization. The school district spends $1.2 billion. This is your way as a taxpayer and a voter to provide oversight of it. It's just like oversight of the ports, but in some ways a lot more interesting. The reality is the school board should provide oversight over three things: hiring and firing the superintendent, adoption of policy, and adoption of a budget. And I think as a school board member, as unfun as that sounds, that is what I'm going to focus on. And I'd add one last point, which is that oversight is a team sport. It is not something that can be done by any single one school board member. So as a board member, what I would be most focused on is broadening the oversight that is done of the district by engaging the rest of the board in that process.
Evan?
So one of the things that I have learned on this journey is that no individual board member has any individual authority. The authority of the school board rests with them as a body. So for that reason, it is really important for the school board to work together collaboratively and to echo everybody else's sentiments around. I think we're more or less in agreement about what the school board is responsible for doing. And I think remembering that we pay the superintendent a lot of money every year to manage his staff, and that is his job. And our job is to make sure that they are delivering the results that the community wants to see. I also think that having been engaged in this campaign for the last few months with kids and trying to work, it's a lot. It's really a lot for a volunteer job. And I think we need to really be realistic about what we can expect people to put into this when we're not paying them, and who that eliminates from the possibility of ever serving on the board.
Thank you, Evan. Okay, moving on to question number 7, which you've touched on during your comments. Now you've touched on parts of this, but let's get down to it real specific. How do you define your authority, responsibilities, and limitations as a school board member in relationship to the superintendent of schools. Start off with Gina.
Yeah, I think that we've touched on it a little bit. I think part of the role of the board is obviously to hire a superintendent, and I think that is part of the role. I think the other ways in which you keep a superintendent accountable, is through the budget, is through the creation of policy, and is through creating strong relationships with the superintendent and with your fellow board members. I don't necessarily have anything additional to add. Thank you.
Thank you, Gina. Ben?
Okay, couple of things. So the school board hires and rehires or chooses not to rehire the superintendent on a contract basis. And our current superintendent his contract is up in June, I believe. And so we have a decision coming our way. Do we want to rehire this person or look for a new one? Does he want the job too? One of the biggest things that the board gets to do and has to do is provide really tough oversight of him in an evaluation. Did he do a good job? Is he the leader that we want? So that's the first thing you got to really dig into, and you have to be willing to ask hard questions. The second problem that the board has to face, though, is that we've had a lot of superintendents in Seattle Public Schools, and we've had a lot of them recently. So that's a tough balancing act. You're going to ask hard questions of the current one you have, but you really want to think, do I really want to change over here? So the last thing that you really want to think about, that I think I'll think a lot about as a school board member, is how do you provide effective oversight and partnership to a superintendent? Because that's not an easy job, but you also want to make sure that they're focused on the right stuff. So that's where I'll spend my time.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Evan? Sure. Yes. Try to be a little bit different. How do you define your authority, responsibilities, and limitations as a school board member in a relationship to the superintendent of schools?
This is a good question because I remember when several years ago, there was an issue at one of my kids' elementary schools, and we were not making any progress at the building level with dealing with it. And so we went to our school board rep at the time, and I thought at the time, and the other parents that came with me thought she's gonna go deal with this problem for us. And what I have since come to understand is that there was nothing that she could do for us except to wayfind and tell us, here's who you need to go. Let me put you in touch with the person who can help you. And so I think understanding that's a limitation of the board, that we cannot do the individual bidding of people in our districts, but we can, when a problem arises that they are unable to solve at the building level, we can tell them where they need to go in order for that problem to be addressed.
Lisa Minnelli.
So as with so many relationships in our lives, some of the thing that as a school board director, I've had to really take a lot of responsibility in is being sure that I'm being clear and that I'm being working in tandem with my school board directors. I can say whatever I want on the dais in public comment. I can text the superintendent or call a staff person, and I mean, I shouldn't. I could, but it doesn't mean anything. And I need to remember that it doesn't mean anything in terms of direction to the superintendent unless it's something that's been discussed, debated, voted on in public by the full board and provided officially to the superintendent. That's how we give the superintendent direction. And we have to be really, really hold our integrity, hold ourselves to that so that the superintendent can be effective, because ultimately what we want is for the superintendent to do a good job for our students. And we have to be clear about what we think that is.
Thank you, Lisa. Debbie?
So I agree with much what has already been said, but as somebody who is a former executive director, I know that my board held me accountable by an evaluation process They continually ask me questions around the budget, around our programming, and I was responsible for always giving them answers and being transparent and prepared. And so I think from a board perspective, it's my job to ask tough questions on a regular basis at board meetings, making sure that I understand what numbers mean, the budget, how it's connected to programming, how impactful the money that we're spending is, and that I am getting those answers on a timely basis so that I know what oversight looks like as a team effort with the board. And if that doesn't happen, if we as a board are not satisfied with how the district or how the superintendent is leading with the budget and policies, that comes up at the evaluation level and whether or not we choose to rehire that person. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. Well, that wraps up our questioning for this evening, specific questions. And now for the closing statements. There'll be 2 minutes each. And those of you as candidates, you have 2 minutes for your closing statements, which will be given in reverse order from the opening statements. We'll start off with District 3, Gina.
Sure, District 6. So thank you all for hosting this evening. This is wonderfully organized. We do a lot of these, and this is incredible how organized and put together. So thank you all for hosting us this evening and giving the school board the time of day. And thank you to Doris, the chair, and Neil for moderating. You did awesome. This has been an interesting experience. You know, campaigning for school board is citywide. You get to meet folks from across the city, hear their concerns, and then try to make a difference. It's a tall order, but it's exciting. And this is something that I believe that everyone here wants to do and would do well. As I said in my opening remarks, I think that education is the foundation of our democracy. And here we should have one of the best education systems in the country. I believe that I bring the experience in order to do that, having dealt with difficult budgets and also difficult policy through my career. I have material out front and as well as my business cards. I would love to chat further with folks if there are individual questions or concerns. Thank you for hosting us.
Yeah, thank you very much, Gina. Ben?
Thanks for having us. This has been a really lovely experience. It's been great to have a really great conversation. Thanks, Neil, and everybody for hosting and putting all this together. It's a lovely room. Really, thanks very much for the time. I thought maybe I would just spend my closing talking a little bit about my background, since I've been talking a lot about budgets and numbers, and maybe just get to know me a little bit as a person. So I've lived here in Seattle for 20 years. When I first moved here, I worked in local politics and organizing. I worked for the Washington Low Income Housing Alliance, as I mentioned. I also worked for a group called the Housing Development Consortium. I remain really passionate about housing affordability as a problem. By the way, that's a problem that affects pretty much every demographic and age group in Seattle. We have a very serious senior housing problem in Seattle. Before I moved to Seattle, I lived in New York City, where I was a community organizer. I worked on digital divide issues, and I helped bring resources into local public schools. Since being out here and after finishing up working in politics for a while and getting kind of burnt out, I went to UW, where I got my master's in business, and now I work at big tech companies. I work at Google now. Before that, I was at Amazon and Microsoft and a bunch of startups. I've got a daughter in 6th at Gitenstein. She is a dancer and a singer and keeps me very, very busy. And I got a son who is a music player and is much smarter than me. And I've got a wife who grew up going to Seattle Public. I'm doing this mostly for them and for the future versions of them. This isn't a part of my career plan. I don't need this for sort of what I'm trying to do for the rest of my life. I'm doing this because I'm deeply worried about the future of Seattle Public Schools, and because I think Seattle Public Schools are an amazing institution that we really, really need to see not just protected, but grow and expand in their ambition. And that will take some changes and I think some good, tough leadership. So thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks, Ben. Evan?
Just like to add my thanks for hosting us. Your questions were very thoughtful and I appreciated all of them and I appreciate the warm welcome. And it was really nice to get to speak with some of you before the forum started. So thank you again for having us. This running for school board is really far outside my comfort zone. Never something I ever imagined doing, truly. I have an arts background. As I said at the beginning, I'm a filmmaker. Never, ever imagined myself engaging in electoral politics, honestly. I'm doing this because I was asked to do it by a number of people in my community because of my advocacy at my kids' schools and my demonstrated passion for making sure that every kid in our city has a shot at a great education, which I really do believe is so critical. So that's why I'm in it. At the beginning of the journey, I had a lot of educating myself to do around how this all works. And I've spent hours and hours talking to almost all of the school board members on the current board. And I've learned so much, and it is like drinking from a fire hose. There's just so much information, and there's only so much you can take in at a time. But what really inspired me was, and I mentioned this before, but I think it's really important, the groundwork that has been laid by the current board and the superintendent over the last couple of years in the form of making very clear metrics around what kinds of outcomes we want to see and having a clear plan for holding the superintendent accountable for that, and really coming together and working together as a team. I just feel really good about that. I really feel that that is a paradigm shift from how our district has operated for a number of years. And systemic change is slow. It is long and slow. And we are not going to see the immediate benefits of this transformation right away. It's going to take some time, but I do believe important groundwork has been laid. And I am very much a relationship person. And I believe very much in building strong relationships and that those are ultimately what keep us together. So that's why I'm doing this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Evan. Okay. Debbie, I guess.
I want to echo as well. These were very thoughtful questions, and I appreciate your time this evening. I want to say a few things. My vision around becoming a school board director is I really want to see smaller class sizes. I know as an educator, that makes a difference. I want academic excellence for all students, regardless of your socioeconomic class, your race, your gender, your sexual orientation, your ability. I want to make sure that every single student has a sense of belonging because I know that that's part of the foundation for academic excellence. And that's why I'm doing this. And that's why I'm running today. I am very concerned about school closures. I know that this is going to be disruptive to students and families. And if we know anything about the school closures that happened 15 years ago, where the Seattle School District closed 10 schools and they got the enrollment decline wrong, and then they opened up another 5 schools. It was incredibly disruptive. And we are not there yet. The board actually will be making a decision around school closures in 2.5 months. The scheduled vote is December 13th. That's not a lot of time. There hasn't been community engagement. There hasn't been true transparency around this, and I'm very concerned about it. However, one last thing, I'm also running because I believe representation matters. I want to be an out strong LGBTQ voice on the board with an intersectional lens and making sure that communities are represented that aren't represented right now. Thank you so much. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Debbie. Lisa?
Thank you. Just one point of correction. We're not going to vote on which schools. We're going to be presented with an approach plan in 2.5 months. In 2.5 months, you're not going to see a list of schools that are going to get be on the chopping block, just to clarify. So yes, thank you so much for having us. This was my favorite event, I think, in 2019 and looking to be so again this year. Your questions are very thoughtful and also very well informed. This is clearly a crowd who knows what they're talking about when it comes to our schools. So as a violinist and as a person with a master's degree in set design for theater, the last thing I thought that I might be is an advocate for effective governance. But throughout my time as an advocate, as a PTA member and leader, and then as a board director, I've learned so much about how critically important effective governance and good governance practices are to ensuring the success of our students. I've worked with boards and districts from all across, not just the state, but the country, and seen and studied the practices that work and that don't, the things that make a board functional and not. And the reactive and unpredictable cadence of board work, the contentious relationships between boards and superintendents, the role confusion and the kind of gotcha governance that some folks like to do, where they hammer on the superintendent from the dais, but didn't do their own board homework and bringing forth guidance in advance, is rampant and is so damaging, and it has an impact on our students. And so that's really why I'm running for re-election, because as Evan noted, we have, even in spite of recovering from the pandemic, have implemented some shifts in focusing the board's attention on the things that matter most in holding our superintendent accountable. And I'm just committed to continuing that work. Thank you, Adele.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Thank you, all of you. Thank you very much. I was saying you're thinking about reflecting on the responses to the questions tonight, and we really appreciate your very, very thoughtful comments. I guess the best way to describe it. I think we've got some tough voters have some tough calls to make, but looking forward to the school board that'll emerge in November. So with that, I just have one special comment to make. I'm going to sit down in a minute, but I want to thank one person tonight. I think has deserved a little recognition. She's been involved in leading our question development effort over the last how many years? Doris, she's done a wonderful job. You heard the comments today about our questions, and she's the leader of making this happen. Week in, out, month out over the many years. I'm just trying to think of all the times I've been. So give her a worthy hand, Doris. Yeah. So that's the reputation we have. That's why we do attract candidates. So thank you, Doris, for all that. And thank you all of the candidates for participating tonight, and appreciate what your efforts and your thoughts, and look forward to the election results. With that, I'll turn it back to Doris as our chair for the evening.
Thank you. Oh, thank you, Neil. And thank you to our candidates. We appreciate your willingness to run for public office in these contentious times. And I must say, as a former school board member many years ago, you have brought back any number of memories of some of the problems that board members face. Credit should also go to those working behind the scenes to make this forum possible. Adele Reynolds and Susan Underwood are our timers in the front row. Lisa Ransom, the events and programs manager for Horizon House, is our technical director in the back. And Nick Linsall, our audiovisual production specialist, is the video camera specialist. He too is at the table in the back. Thanks to them and to all of the volunteers who help make this program possible. Most importantly, thanks to our audience. You, the voters, have the ultimate power to decide which candidates are the best qualified to serve as members of the Seattle School District Board of Directors. You will be asked to cast your ballot for 4 different races. Each of these, not each of them, but there are 4 school board seats that will be filled by 4 candidates. So be sure to mail your ballots by November 7th. And that's it for tonight. Good night.